The courtroom fell silent as Judge Judy Sheindlin fixed her piercing gaze on the young woman before her. Hailey Whitlock, a social media fashion influencer with 2 million followers, stood trembling at the defendant's podium. Her perfectly manicured nails gripped the wooden rail as Judge Judy held up a stack of Instagram posts, evidence that would shatter her carefully crafted image and expose a troubling truth about influencer culture's dark side. At 26, Hailey Whitlock appeared to have everything. Her Instagram feed sparkled with designer outfits, exclusive restaurant check-ins, and carefully staged photos in her luxury Manhattan apartment. Each morning, she would wake up in her king-sized bed, draped in Egyptian cotton sheets, and start her day with a precise routine of content creation. The soft morning light streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows provided the perfect natural lighting for her daily outfit posts. 2 years ago, Hailey had quit her entry-level marketing job to become a full-time fashion influencer. Her rise seemed meteoric. Within 18 months, she had amassed 2 million followers who hung on her every fashion recommendation and lifestyle tip. Her feed promised accessible luxury, showing her followers how to create expensive-looking outfits on what she claimed was a modest budget. "You don't need to be rich to look rich," became her signature tagline. Behind the filtered perfection of her social media presence, Hailey's reality was crumbling. The designer bags prominently displayed in her photos were rented. The exclusive restaurants she tagged in her posts were often promotional events where she wasn't spending a dime. Her seemingly endless wardrobe consisted mostly of clothes she would wear once for photos, carefully hiding the tags, before returning them to stores. The Manhattan apartment that served as the backdrop for many of her most popular posts was becoming her biggest problem. At $4,000 per month, the rent consumed a massive portion of her actual income. While her social media metrics showed impressive engagement, her bank account told a different story. Sponsored post payments were irregular, and many brands preferred to compensate her with product rather than cash. For 6 months, Hailey had been playing a dangerous game with her landlord, Mr. Fleming. She delayed rent payments with increasingly creative excuses, promising that big brand deals were just around the corner. She leveraged her social media influence, offering to promote his other properties in exchange for rent flexibility. Mr. Fleming, a traditional businessman who had managed Manhattan properties for 3 decades, remained unmoved by her promises of exposure and social media value. The real trouble started when Hailey decided to take matters into her own hands. She began posting subtle hints about maintenance issues in her apartment, knowing her massive following would take notice. She crafted stories about how some landlords didn't understand the changing dynamics of the modern economy. Without naming names, she painted herself as a victim of an outdated system that didn't respect digital entrepreneurs. As her financial situation worsened, Hailey's posts became more elaborate. She showcased new designer purchases and exotic weekend getaways, trying to maintain the illusion of success that her followers had come to expect. Each new post dug her deeper into debt, but she convinced herself it was necessary investment in her brand. Her comment section overflowed with admiration and envy, fueling her belief that she was too important to be bound by traditional obligations like monthly rent. What Hailey didn't realize was that Mr. Fleming had been methodically documenting everything. Every late payment, every broken promise, every social media post that contradicted her claims of financial hardship. When she started using her influence to pressure him publicly, he decided it was time to take action. He didn't just want his rent money. He wanted to expose the smoke and mirrors that had become increasingly common in the influencer economy. The situation reached its breaking point when Hailey's followers began leaving negative reviews for Mr. Fleming's other properties, despite never having stepped foot in them. The coordinated attack on his business reputation was the final straw. He filed a lawsuit not just for the unpaid rent, but for damages to his business reputation. When the case landed in Judge Judy's courtroom, neither Hailey nor Mr. Fleming could have predicted how their story would become a watershed moment in the ongoing debate about influencer culture and accountability. The first warning signs appeared in March when Hailey missed her rent payment by 2 weeks. Mr. Fleming had initially been understanding. After all, she had been a model tenant for the first year. When she finally paid, she smoothed things over by sending him a basket of expensive wines and a handwritten note explaining how a major brand deal payment had been delayed. Mr. Fleming accepted her explanation, but something about the situation left him uneasy. April's rent came 5 days late, accompanied by a lengthy email about how Hailey's Instagram engagement rates were soaring and how fortunate Mr. Fleming was to have his property featured on such an influential platform. She included screenshots of her posts that showed his building's distinctive architecture in the background, suggesting this exposure was worth thousands in marketing value. Mr. Fleming simply responded with a reminder about the late fee policy outlined in their lease agreement. By May, Hailey had developed a new strategy. She began posting daily videos from her apartment, each one subtly highlighting supposed issues with the property. One day, she'd casually mention the vintage plumbing while doing her skincare routine. The next, she'd talk about charm versus maintenance, while showcasing her outfit against the backdrop of what she called characterfully worn hardwood floors. Her followers began commenting with concerns about her living conditions, despite the apartment being one of the best-maintained units in the building. The situation took a darker turn in June when Hailey orchestrated what she called a rent strike awareness campaign. She never explicitly told her followers to attack Mr. Fleming's business, but her carefully worded posts had the desired effect. Her loyal followers began flooding the review sections of his other properties with negative comments. "If they treat influencers this way, imagine how they treat regular tenants," became a common theme in the reviews, despite none of these people having ever been inside any of his buildings. Mr. Fleming watched his property's ratings plummet across multiple platforms. Prospective tenants began canceling viewings, citing the concerning reviews they'd seen online. The property management company he'd built over 30 years was facing its first major crisis, all because of a tenant who believed her social media following put her above normal rental obligations. In July, Hailey's tactics escalated further. She hosted a live streaming session from her apartment, tears streaming down her face as she talked about housing inequality in the digital age. Without naming Mr. Fleming directly, she painted a picture of landlords who didn't understand that influence was the new currency. Her followers rallied around her, starting a hashtag campaign that quickly gained traction. #JusticeForHailey. The breaking point came when Hailey posted a video titled, "A Day in the Life of a Struggling Creator." The video showed her in her apartment, surrounded by luxury items, while she explained how traditional payment systems didn't account for the value social media influencers brought to properties. She claimed that her presence in the building had increased its value and that charging her rent was double-dipping since she was already providing marketing services through her content. Mr. Fleming had finally had enough. His lawyer presented him with printed copies of every social media post, email, and text message exchanged with Hailey over the past months. The evidence painted a clear picture of a calculated campaign to pressure him into providing free housing. Even more damning were screenshots from Hailey's other social media accounts where she bragged about her monthly earnings from brand deals, numbers that directly contradicted her claims of financial hardship. When Mr. Fleming filed his lawsuit, he made sure to include not just the unpaid rent but also damages for the coordinated attack on his business reputation. His lawyer suggested taking the case to small claims court, where it caught the attention of Judge Judy's producers. They saw an opportunity to address a growing trend of influencers attempting to leverage their following for free products and services. Hailey initially celebrated when she received the court summons, seeing it as an opportunity for even more content. She posted a video of herself preparing for court, complete with a montage of her selecting the perfect outfit and practicing what she called her testimony face in the mirror. She was convinced that her social media savvy would win over Judge Judy just as it had won over her followers. She had no idea she was about to face someone who had spent decades seeing through precisely the kind of manipulation she had perfected online. The television courtroom buzzed with anticipation as Hailey Whitlock made her entrance. She had chosen her outfit carefully, a cream-colored blazer over a silk blouse, paired with what her followers would recognize as $900 designer trousers. Her makeup was perfectly applied for the cameras, and she carried a designer handbag that still had its tags discreetly tucked inside. Mr. Fleming sat at the plaintiff's table in a simple navy suit, a manila folder of documents placed neatly before him. Judge Judy Sheindlin entered the courtroom with her characteristic swift stride, her black robe flowing behind her. She took her seat and immediately began reviewing the case file, her reading glasses perched on the edge of her nose. The bailiff called the court to order, announcing the case of Fleming versus Whitlock, a dispute over unpaid rent and business defamation. Hailey maintained her camera-ready smile as Judge Judy began her preliminary questions. When asked about her profession, Hailey straightened up proudly. "I'm a digital media entrepreneur and fashion influence curator with over 2 million followers," she announced, as if reading from her social media bio. Judge Judy's expression remained neutral, but her eyes narrowed slightly at Hailey's carefully crafted terminology. Mr. Fleming presented his case first, his voice steady as he outlined the months of missed payments and Hailey's escalating social media campaign against him. He pulled out printed screenshots of her posts, text messages showing broken promises of payment, and documentation of the negative reviews that had damaged his business. Judge Judy examined each piece of evidence methodically, occasionally glancing at Hailey, who had started to shift uncomfortably in her designer heels. When it was Hailey's turn to speak, she launched into what seemed like a rehearsed speech about the changing nature of the economy. Your Honor, traditional business models don't account for the value of digital influence. My presence in Mr. Fleming's building has increased its profile significantly. I featured the apartment in over 200 posts, reaching millions of potential tenants. She pulled out her phone, attempting to show Judge Judy her engagement metrics. Judge Judy's response was immediate and sharp. Put the phone away, young lady. This is a courtroom, not a TikTok video. Hailey's hand trembled as she returned the phone to her designer bag. The judge continued, Now, tell me why you believe you shouldn't have to pay the agreed-upon rent for a property you're occupying. Hailey's practiced composure began to crack under Judge Judy's direct questioning. She tried to explain how influencer marketing worked, citing industry statistics about the value of social media exposure. Judge Judy listened with increasing skepticism as Hailey described how her followers' engagement should be considered a form of payment. The turning point came when Judge Judy asked about Hailey's income from sponsored posts. Hailey claimed she was struggling financially, but Mr. Fleming was ready. He produced copies of emails from Hailey to potential brand partners, boasting about her monthly earnings of over $20,000 from sponsored content. The documents showed a clear pattern. Hailey was earning substantial income while claiming poverty to avoid paying rent. Judge Judy held up one particularly damning piece of evidence, a screenshot of Hailey's Instagram story showing her celebrating a $15,000 payment from a luxury brand, posted the same day she had emailed Mr. Fleming claiming she couldn't afford rent. Hailey's carefully constructed narrative began to unravel as Judge Judy methodically compared her public posts with her private communications. The courtroom atmosphere grew tenser as Judge Judy began to focus on Hailey's campaign against Mr. Fleming's other properties. So, you didn't explicitly tell your followers to leave negative reviews, but you knew they would after your emotional live stream about housing inequality? She asked, her tone carrying years of experience in cutting through deception. Hailey's response was telling. I can't control what my community does to support me, she said, her voice smaller than before. They saw my struggle and acted on their own. Judge Judy's expression made it clear she wasn't buying this explanation. The judge picked up another document, a direct message Hailey had sent to one of her followers, thanking them for having her back and suggesting other properties they could review. As the first part of the hearing drew to a close, it was becoming clear to everyone in the courtroom that Hailey's influence wouldn't help her here. Judge Judy had seen through the carefully curated image to the calculated manipulation beneath. The stage was set for a ruling that would send shockwaves through the influencer community. But first, there were more revelations to come. The atmosphere in the courtroom shifted dramatically when Judge Judy pulled out a thick folder marked Financial Records. Hailey's confident demeanor faltered as the judge began laying out bank statements obtained through legal discovery. These documents painted a very different picture from the struggling creator narrative Hailey had crafted for her followers. Judge Judy methodically went through the evidence. Ms. Whitlock, these bank records show deposits totaling $147,000 over the past 6 months. That's an average of $24,500 per month. Would you care to explain how someone earning this much money couldn't afford a $4,000 monthly rent payment? Hailey's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. Her carefully applied makeup couldn't hide the flush creeping up her neck. The revelations continued as Judge Judy produced screenshots from Hailey's private Instagram account, one she shared only with close friends. These posts told a very different story from her public persona. While she was posting tearful stories about housing inequality on her main account, she was bragging to her inner circle about gaming the system. One particularly damaging post showed her celebrating at a high-end restaurant, captioned, "Why pay rent when you can pay for influence?" Mr. Fleming's lawyer then presented evidence of Hailey's other luxury expenditures during the months she claimed financial hardship. There were receipts for a $5,000 shopping spree at Gucci, weekly appointments at exclusive salons, and first-class flights to fashion weeks in Paris and Milan. Each piece of evidence drove home the stark contrast between Hailey's public claims and private spending. The most damaging revelation came when Judge Judy addressed Hailey's rent strike awareness campaign. The court was shown direct messages between Hailey and several of her top followers, coordinating what she called reputation management. In these messages, Hailey had explicitly instructed her followers on which of Mr. Fleming's properties to target and what specific complaints to mention in their reviews, despite never having visited these locations. Hailey attempted to defend herself, her voice shaking. "Your Honor, in the influencer industry, image is everything. I had to maintain certain appearances to keep my brand partnerships. Judge Judy's response was swift and cutting. What you had to do, young lady, was pay your rent. The only thing you've influenced is your own credibility. The courtroom fell silent as Judge Judy held up Hailey's most recent brand partnership contract. A deal worth $30,000 for 3 Instagram posts. The contract was dated just 2 days before Hailey had sent Mr. Fleming an email claiming she couldn't afford that month's rent due to industry-wide payment delays. Mr. Fleming then shared security camera footage from the building's lobby, showing Hailey accepting deliveries of luxury items on the same days she was sending emails about financial hardship. The timestamps on the footage matched perfectly with her social media posts showcasing her latest gifted items. Items that, as the receipts proved, she had purchased herself while claiming inability to pay rent. The final blow came when Judge Judy presented Hailey's application for a new luxury apartment in a competing building. The application, submitted just a week before the court date, listed her monthly income as $35,000. Hailey had been planning to move to a more expensive apartment while still owing months of back rent to Mr. Fleming. Hailey's carefully constructed world of influence and image was crumbling in real time. Her followers watching the live court feed were witnessing the unraveling of the aspirational lifestyle she had sold them. Comments on her latest Instagram post, made just before entering the courtroom, shifted from supportive to skeptical as viewers processed the revelations. Judge Judy removed her glasses and looked directly at Hailey. Ms. Whitlock, you've created a fantasy world where followers equal authority and influence substitutes for responsibility. But here's the reality. You signed a lease, you lived in the apartment, and you had the means to pay. Everything else, your influence, your followers, your social media empire, is smoke and mirrors when it comes to basic contractual obligations. The young influencer's designer facade had completely crumbled. Her earlier confidence was replaced by the demeanor of someone seeing their carefully curated world dissolve under the harsh light of reality. As Judge Judy prepared to deliver her verdict, it was clear this case would become a landmark moment in the intersection of social media influence and real-world accountability. Judge Judy straightened the papers before her, the courtroom hanging on her every movement. Hailey Whitlock stood at the podium, her designer outfit now seeming more like a costume than the power statement she'd intended. Mr. Fleming sat quietly, his years of property management experience telling him justice was about to be served. Ms. Whitlock, Judge Judy began, her voice carrying the weight of decades on the bench. This court has seen many cases of tenants trying to avoid their obligations, but your actions represent a particularly troubling evolution of that behavior. You've not only failed to pay rent while having ample means to do so, but you've weaponized your social media following to damage Mr. Fleming's business reputation. The judge referenced her notes, continuing with precision. The evidence shows you earned $147,000 in the past 6 months while claiming financial hardship. You spent $5,000 at Gucci but couldn't pay $4,000 in rent. You coordinated a campaign of false reviews against Mr. Fleming's other properties, causing demonstrable harm to his business. This court finds your actions not just irresponsible, but malicious. Hailey's perfectly manicured hands gripped the podium as Judge Judy announced a ruling. Judgment for the plaintiff in the amount of $24,000 for 6 months of unpaid rent. Additionally, this court awards Mr. Fleming $50,000 in damages for the coordinated attack on his business reputation. Ms. Whitlock, you will also be required to post a public retraction and apology on all your social media platforms, acknowledging your false statements and the harm they caused. The impact was immediate. Hailey's face crumpled as the reality of owing $74,000 hit her. Her phone buzzed continuously in her designer bag as news of the verdict spread through social media. The courtroom audience, many of them influencers themselves who had come to support her, sat in stunned silence. Mr. Fleming's relief was visible, but Judge Judy wasn't finished. And one more thing, Ms. Whitlock. This court is ordering you to disclose your actual income on any future rental applications. Your attempt to secure a new luxury apartment while owing months of back rent shows a pattern of deception that this court will not tolerate. Within hours of the verdict, Hailey's carefully curated social media empire began to unravel. Brand partners who had watched the proceedings started sending termination notices for their contracts. Her DMs filled with messages from followers expressing disappointment in her deception. The hashtag Justice for Hailey that she had encouraged now trended for entirely different reasons. The case quickly became a watershed moment in influencer culture. Major news outlets picked up the story, running headlines about the dark side of social media influence. Marketing agencies began including Whitlock clauses in their contracts, requiring influencers to disclose any ongoing legal disputes that might damage brand relationships. Hailey's required public apology post appeared that evening, stripped of her usual filters and carefully staged lighting. "Today, Judge Judy helped me understand that influence comes with responsibility," she wrote. "I apologize to Mr. Fleming and to my followers. I got caught up in maintaining an image at the expense of basic integrity. The lifestyle I portrayed wasn't real, and the harm I caused was." The comment section under her apology filled with responses from other influencers sharing similar pressures to maintain appearances beyond their means. A conversation about authenticity and responsibility in social media began to emerge from the wreckage of Hailey's reputation. Mr. Fleming received hundreds of messages from property managers nationwide, thanking him for taking a stand against influence-based manipulation. His property's online ratings began to recover as Hailey's followers removed their fake reviews. Some even posted new apologies, acknowledging their role in the harassment campaign. 1 week after the verdict, Hailey posted again, this time from a much smaller apartment in Queens. Her designer clothes were gone, replaced by modest, unbranded attire. "Reality isn't about followers or influence," she wrote. "It's about honesty and meeting your obligations. Judge Judy didn't just rule against me. She woke me up to the person I was becoming." The case's impact rippled through the influencer industry. Talent agencies began requiring financial literacy courses for their clients. Property management companies updated their policies regarding social media harassment. A new awareness emerged about the gap between curated online personas and real-world responsibilities. 3 months after the landmark verdict, Mr. Fleming sat in his office reviewing rental applications. The changes in the industry were already evident. New applications now included social media disclosure sections, requiring prospective tenants to list their online presence and commercial activities. Property managers nationwide had adopted similar policies, creating a new standard of transparency in the age of digital influence. The case had triggered a fundamental shift in how society viewed social media success. Marketing professors at top universities used the Whitlock versus Fleming case to teach ethics in digital advertising. The verdict had exposed the hollow nature of influence without responsibility, prompting a broader conversation about authenticity in the digital age. Hailey Whitlock's transformation became a cautionary tale that resonated far beyond the courtroom. She had moved into a modest one-bedroom apartment in Queens, taking a job at a digital marketing agency where she helped brands develop ethical influencer partnerships. Her new content focused on financial literacy and authentic living, drawing smaller but more engaged audiences who appreciated her honesty about past mistakes. During a rare interview with a business magazine, Mr. Fleming reflected on the case's impact. "This wasn't about punishing someone for their success online," he explained. "It was about maintaining basic standards of honesty and responsibility in a changing world." Judge Judy understood that influence without accountability is dangerous. His property management company had since developed a comprehensive social media policy, protecting both tenants' right to post content and landlords' right to fair treatment. The ripple effects touched every corner of the influencer economy. Talent agencies now required their clients to undergo financial management training. Brand contracts included specific clauses about transparency and authentic representation. The era of consequence-free content creation had ended, replaced by a more mature understanding of digital influence's real-world implications. Judge Judy's ruling had become required reading in law schools, particularly in courses dealing with social media law and digital ethics. Her clear-eyed assessment of influence as a tool rather than a shield against responsibility helped shape new legal frameworks for the digital age. The case established precedent for how courts would handle disputes involving social media influence and real-world obligations. 1 year after the verdict, Hailey wrote a thoughtful post that went viral for entirely different reasons than her previous content. "Judge Judy didn't just rule on a rent dispute," she wrote. "She ruled on the fantasy world many of us had created, where followers counted more than facts and influence mattered more than integrity. Her verdict woke up not just me, but an entire industry." The case's impact extended to consumer behavior. Followers became more discerning, questioning the authenticity of lifestyle content and demanding transparency about sponsorships and financial arrangements. The hashtag Real Influence emerged, celebrating content creators who maintained integrity while building their platforms. Mr. Fleming's business not only recovered but thrived in the aftermath. His stance against influence-based manipulation earned him respect in the property management community. He began speaking at industry conferences about maintaining professional standards in the age of social media. His story encouraged other business owners to stand firm against pressure from digital influences. During a real estate investors meeting, Mr. Fleming shared his final thoughts on the experience. Judge Judy did more than deliver a verdict, he said. She reminded us that no matter how the world changes, certain principles remain constant. Honesty, responsibility, and integrity aren't outdated concepts. They're the foundation of any sustainable success, whether online or off. The case of Fleming versus Whitlock became more than a television courtroom moment. It marked a turning point in how society navigated the intersection of digital influence and real-world responsibility. Judge Judy's wisdom had illuminated a path forward, showing that while platforms and technologies might evolve, the basic principles of justice and accountability remain unchanged.